Good morning, I'm Val, I'm a member of the church here, and it's a privilege to be reading the Bible from page 83, Exodus 25, and we're starting at the beginning of that chapter. Page 83, chapter 25, starting at verse 1. The Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites to bring me an offering. You are to receive the offering for me from everyone whose heart prompts them to give. These are the offerings you are to receive from them: gold, silver, and bronze, blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, and fine linen, goat hair, ram skins, dyed red, and another type of durable leather, acacia wood, olive oil for the light, spices for the anointing oil, and for the fragrant incense, and onyx stones and other gems to be mounted on the ephod and breastpiece. Then let them make a sanctuary for me, and I will dwell among them. Make this tabernacle and all its furnishings exactly like the pattern I will show you." And then please turn over to chapter 40 on page 100. And we're starting at verse 17. So the tabernacle was set up on the first day of the first month in the second year. When Moses set up the tabernacle, he put the bases in place, erected the frames, inserted the crossbars, and set up the posts. Then he spread the tent over the tabernacle and put the covering over the tent, as the Lord commanded him. He took the tablets of the covenant law and placed them in the ark, attached the poles to the ark, and put the atonement cover over it. Then he brought the ark into the tabernacle and hung the shielding curtain and shielded the ark of the covenant law, as the Lord commanded him. Moses placed the table in the tent of meeting on the north side of the tabernacle, outside the curtain, and set out the bread on it before the Lord, as the Lord commanded him. He placed the lampstand in the tent of meeting opposite the table on the south side of the tabernacle, and set up the lamps before the Lord, as the Lord commanded him. Moses placed the gold altar in the tent of meeting in front of the curtain, and burned fragrant incense on it, as the Lord commanded him. Then he put up the curtain at the entrance to the tabernacle. He set the altar of burnt offering near the entrance to the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, and offered on it burnt offerings and grain offerings, as the Lord commanded him. He placed the basin between the tent of meeting and the altar and put water in it for washing. And Moses and Aaron and his sons used it to wash their hands and feet. They washed whenever they entered the tent of meeting or approached the altar, as the Lord commanded Moses. Then Moses set up the courtyard around the tabernacle and altar and put up the curtain at the entrance to the courtyard. And so Moses finished the work. Then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses could not enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled on it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. In all the travels of the Israelites, whenever the cloud lifted from above the tabernacle, they would set out. But if the cloud did not lift, they did not set out until the day it lifted. So the cloud of the Lord was over the tabernacle by day, and fire was in the cloud by night, in the sight of all the Israelites during all their travels.
Thank you so much, Val. Well, we've been on a journey over the last couple of months, a journey of freedom, as we've been going through the book of Exodus. And we've seen how God delivered his people from slavery and bondage in chapters 1 to 18, and then how he directs his people from chapters 19 to 24. Because God wanted a relationship with his people, and he said to them, "You'll be my people, and I'll be your God." 2.5 million people. The Israelites were in slavery and Egypt. They'd been there for over 400 years. And so they needed values to live by. They hadn't had to make decisions for themselves before, and they needed to know what the character was like of the God who had rescued them. And so he gave them the 10 Commandments. And then after God delivers and God directs, we come to chapters 25 to 40. But should there be an and? Aren't basically these two components that we see on the screen basically what the Christian faith is all about? God sets you free from something, whether that is guilt or addiction or shame, and then gives people laws to live by. Isn't that it? There isn't an and, is there? Well, if that's your view of Christianity or even your experience of Christianity, then you're sorely mistaken. Because the exodus of Egypt wasn't the final destination. Didn't stop at chapter 18. It didn't even stop when God gave them the 10 Commandments. That's not the culmination, the climax of the book of Exodus. It's all heading to what we're looking at today. And it's a magnificent climax when we understand it. 15 chapters, that's what we're dealing with today. Over a third of the book of Exodus. And it's all given to the tabernacle. Now, as we read those words, which Val read, I reckon some of us would have found it difficult to concentrate and to follow. I mean, the tabernacle, what's it all about? How is the tabernacle even greater than deliverance from slavery, even greater than the 10 Commandments? Well, it's because the story of Exodus starts in slavery, but it isn't complete until you get to worship, where God dwells with his people, and they are in this family relationship. You see, everybody lives for someone or something. And what you live for, that is ultimately what you serve. And if it's not the living God that you are led by, then you are still a slave as well, like these people were in Egypt. Now, until you are bowing down, amazed by the glory of the living God, are you truly liberated? Until you get to worship, of experiencing God, are you really free? And that's why this is the climax. But why do we need to worship at all? Why do we need a tabernacle or a temple, which is what the tabernacle became when the Israelites obtained land? Well, pretty much every civilization until very recently had something like a temple. And almost every civilization around the world believes in two things: that there is another world, there is a spiritual realm, and there's some kind of barrier between them, the person, and that spiritual being. Different cultures had different priests and practices, but basically agreed on those two principles. Now, that was true until the present time in the West. Because in the West, we live in the first era, really, about 100 years, that has said, you don't need to know anything about the other world to live effectively and account for this world. Because everything in this world can have a natural, this world explanation and solution. Whether that is physiological or sociological or psychological. Our culture says we can solve our issues without the need of God. Everything can be reduced. Everything can be seen through. So we don't need tabernacles and temples. But even in our culture, things are changing. There is a resurgence of spirituality in the Western world in many different forms. Now, after about 100 years of rejecting the other world, many people are struggling to find answers to the fundamental questions of life. Questions like purpose. because a number of philosophers are grappling with this and saying, if there's no other world, then isn't everything in this world meaningless if we've just come here by chance? The Scottish philosopher, not a Christian, a guy called Alistair MacIntyre, grappled with this question. With the question of how do you decide if something is good and valuable? He says, will you consider its purpose? And he took an illustration of a wristwatch. How do you know if something is a good or bad wristwatch? Well, you have to look at what it's designed for. It's not designed for hammering nails, but it's pretty good at telling the time. And if it does tell the time right, then it's a good wristwatch. Therefore, until we know what something is designed for, we can't know its purpose or values. What are human beings designed for? Are they designed for anything? Or are we just blind, indifferent, and worthless? And to counteract this kind of lack of ultimate purpose, some are reflecting that we've given an overly positive message to our children in the last few decades, where people have said, you are amazing, you can do anything. If you believe in yourself, you can change the world. But when they realize that they're not the top of their class, maybe they are in primary school or even secondary school, but when they go to university and they're filled with other very bright people, they crumble. Or we're in their first job, and after a few months, they haven't made this radical change, this significant difference, and they're battling with job satisfaction. Have a look at the screen and watch an advert about a new Netflix TV series. And it's about a woman who's trying to find herself. And pay particular attention to the final scene right by the river.
I want to be in charge of my own destiny.
I want to see the outside world.
I want to get rid of all the diseases plaguing mankind and replace them with worse ones.
You're out of control. I don't even know what to yell at you.
I'm not so bad.
Well, you did kill that one guy.
I'd be fine if someone could just slide my head up a bit.
Isn't there a point in everyone's life where they need to go and figure out who they are? Whew, I'm a good butcher.
This is a pet shop.
Woohoo! What's this feeling I don't want to drink away?
That's hope.
I've got a bad idea.
What's bad about it? Oh, never mind. I see. I'm so proud of you. I'm drowning! I'm Elfo.
Remember, the trick to not getting swept over the waterfall is swimming upstream.
Got it. You can do anything if you believe in yourself.
I'm a good butcher. No, this is a pet shop. What is that thing I'm trying to drink away? It's called hope. You can do anything if you believe in yourself. No, you need wisdom and experience to guide you, or you'll be swept off the cliff. I was talking to a guy just outside this week. And I said, he's like, I don't need prayer, I don't need any God, I don't need anything. And I said, well, how do you get your values? And he said, well, I decide myself. And I said, but what if your values are different from someone else's? Well, they won't be. I said, what if for therapeutic reasons, maybe you've been struggling and you've been suppressing your emotions and you need to express those. And to do that, you need to, the best thing for you is to punch me in the face. He's like, I wouldn't do that. I said, why not? Well, I just wouldn't. And I said, what about nations? How do nations decide what is right and wrong? He's like, well, I don't need to worry about them. I'm just thinking about myself. But very interesting. If you take out God, how do you find real answers? And what about human rights as well? Robert Jarvik, a scientist and inventor, he invented the artificial human heart, expresses the modern view when he says, in reality, there are no basic human rights. Mankind created them. They are conventions we agree to abide by for our mutual protection under law. Are there basic animal rights, he asks? Basic plant rights? Basic rights of any kind to protect things on our planet when the sun eventually burns out or when we block it out with radioactive clouds? Someday humans will realize that we are part of nature and not separate from it. We have no more basic rights than viruses, other than those that we create for ourselves through our intellect and our compassion. You see, if human beings are not made and made in the image of God, somehow distinct from animals, what gives us any more rights than any other species? And some animal rights activists already asked that question. And a writer in an environmental journal even pondered about the logical consequences which have been picked up through these views on human rights. And also, I've seen them in a couple of films over the last decade or so. She said this: if you haven't given voluntary human extinction much thought before, the idea of a world with no people may seem strange. But if you give the idea a chance, I think you might agree that the extinction of humans would mean survival for millions, if not billions, of other Earth-dwelling species. And this is the culmination. Phasing out the human race will solve every problem on Earth, social and environmental. You see, if you take out the ultimate reality, God, then what we have is meaninglessness. It's just chaff. Personalities come and go. Ideas are here and then forgotten. We're made for something greater. And if we don't get this, then often we become cynical and baseless. And my friends, that's why we need tabernacles and temples, because we are searching for purpose and security. We all worship. I was down at St. Mary's yesterday watching Saints play very well, but ultimately draw with Man United. And that sense of longing, of being something greater, something bigger. There is glory in this world. So let's get back to that Bible passage and consider this temple, because most of the 15 chapters we're covering today are about the building of the temple and then the entering of the temple. So go back to chapter 25 and notice how the instructions that God gives to Moses begin in verse 1. He says, "The Lord said to Moses," and we'll pause there. Because this shows that Moses is not drawing up his own plans. He's working exactly to order. And that little phrase, "the Lord said to Moses," is repeated 7 times in these early chapters. And also, did you notice in chapter 40 how often the phrase, "Moses did as the Lord commanded"? Again, that's 7 times in one chapter. Because this is God's house. It is where he will meet with his people. I think it'd be helpful for us to have an idea of what the tabernacle looked like. There was a thick curtain around the whole of the outside. It enclosed the courtyard. So just imagine you're looking from outside the tabernacle and you can see this curtain and you walk in through the curtain. You wouldn't be allowed to, by the way, because it's, so we'll have to imagine it, because only the Levites, the special, one of the tribes of Israel, could go in. But you walk in and you see 2 sections. And the first one is known as the holy place. You see a table with the bread of the presence on it. 12 loaves, freshly baked, often replaced. Those loaves represent God, the provider. 12 loaves for 12 tribes. He was with them to care for the physical needs of all of them. Then you noticed a golden lampstand, which symbolized God, the protector, the God who was always with his people as a constant guide, watching over them. Then at the back of the holy space, there's an altar of incense. No doubt it gives a sense of the nearness and the majesty of the wonder of God. Behind the altar of incense is the most holy place. But dare to imagine that you could have gone inside there. Or you couldn't have gone, of course, because that's where God lives. And no one can approach God and live except the high priest, and only once a year after very elaborate sacrifices. But imagine you could. You would see the ark, one piece of wooden furniture according to God's instructions. If the table spoke of God's provision and the lampstand of the protection of God, the ark spoke of the presence of God, which is why it's described first in chapter 25. The ark comes first because this is the great symbol of God himself. Nothing can be more important. It's a chest, and inside are 2 tablets of stone that God gave to Moses with the 10 Commandments on them. You see, the God who draws near is the God who directs. We live in an age of experience, don't we? Where people want experience, often without purity, but they go together. Yet on top of the chest, containing the law, is a lid. It's called the atonement cover in chapter 25 and verse 17. And in some translations, this is called the mercy seat. So on top of the box that contains the law that human beings can't possibly keep is a lid called mercy. In fact, it's a seat. It's a throne called mercy. This is God's throne. They couldn't see him, but their king was amongst them. And God told Moses in chapter 25, verse 22, on the mercy seat, that's where he would meet his people. And once a year, on the Day of Atonement, the high priest would sprinkle the blood of a sin offering on that mercy seat, on the atonement lid, to atone, to pay for, to do away with the sin of God's people. And then flip forward to chapter 40, to the end of what Val read. When all the instructions have been followed, when the tabernacle has been built. Chapter 40, verse 34 to 38. It says, then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses could not enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled on it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. In all the travels of the Israelites, whenever the cloud lifted from above the tabernacle, they would set out. But if the cloud did not lift, they did not set out until the day it lifted. So the cloud of the Lord was over the tabernacle by day, and the fire was in the cloud by night, in the sight of all the Israelites during all their travels. God had come. So, what does the tabernacle mean for us today? The tabernacle is a big visual aid for the people of God, and it tells us 4 things. Firstly, it gives us a taste of heaven on earth. At the heart of the Israelite community, should we use this microphone? I won't move, I promise. Was the tabernacle. And in the tabernacle was the holy place. And then beyond the holy place was the most holy place. Only God's people could enter the tabernacle, and only priests could access the holy place, and only the high priest could access the most holy place once a year. Also, the materials become more valuable and more beautiful the closer to the center you go, culminating with a pure mercy seat covering the ark. All the elements are to be set apart too, because God is not ordinary. God is not our buddy. He cannot be engaged with casually or on our terms, only on his own. But the people can say, he is with us. He's at the head as a cloud when we travel, and at the center when we camp. God is with us. Maybe think of it like this. The dwelling place of God is like a nuclear power plant in the middle of his people. It has to be built correctly and approached carefully with great caution. Access is restricted to a select few who have specific clothing to wear and tasks to perform. It's tremendously dangerous. Approach in the wrong way and you will die. But it brings awesome power and blessing, off the scale of anything else in any religion in all of the world. The one holy God is with us. Heaven has come to earth. And the second message of this giant visual aid is this, that it cuts away through the barriers between us and God. The first and most important component to be made of the centerpiece of the whole tabernacle was the Holy of Holies, God's presence with his people. But there's barrier after barrier before you could get there. And today, my friends, you can experience the presence of God. And to know God is the most exciting and refreshing thing of any experience you can have. Other things are really like a teardrop compared to the ocean of being in God's presence. But there are barriers. But modern people often say, really? Are there any barriers to God? Can't we just come to him? Well, one of the things I love to do is to spend time chatting to people about where they are on their spiritual journey. And often the idea of connecting with God is very attractive to them. But then as they start reading and exploring, their understanding of God becomes focused on who he is, and they begin to feel a barrier. For example, as a generalization, the older generation feels there's nothing more important than being a good person when it comes to getting to God. But as they begin getting closer to the very good and the totally pure God, they begin to feel that they're not good enough. They experience what some people call a spiritual smallness. They feel a barrier. In general, the younger generation want to be free. And as they come close to the real God, not someone that they've made up, but the real God, they realize he has a will, and that may cross their own desires. Younger people often realize they're not going to be free to do exactly what they want to do, that they'll lose some control, though it's actually the best freedom, as God knows what is best. No fish wants to be so free that it finds itself on dry land. But they experience a barrier, a radical, traumatic, spiritual smallness as well. And in the tabernacle, there's curtain after curtain. But before the tabernacle, at one time, there was no barrier between humans and God. When God first made humans, and because their relationship with God was right, then their relationship with themselves, with the world, and with others was good as well. But when humanity decided that they wanted to set the rules, not God, God caused them to be sent away from his presence, because he cannot be in the presence of rebellion, of sin. Because sin is serious, my friends. But we don't have tabernacles today, do we? Why not? This building is not a temple, it's not a tabernacle. Well, it's because the tabernacle whilst it was the best tent in the world, it was still just a tent. The tabernacle was a shadow of something greater. But who or what was that? Well, do you know what was one of the most enormous claims that Jesus made, which ultimately had him killed? It was this in Matthew chapter 26, verse 61, where a witness in Jesus' trial testified, "This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple or the tabernacle of God and rebuild it in 3 days." And within 24 hours, Jesus was dead. Why was that? Because he said, "I am the tabernacle, I am the temple, I am the way into the heart of things in the tabernacle." And John chapter 1 verse 14 also picks up this theme when it says, "The word, Jesus, became flesh," and literally it says, "tabernacled among us." And then it goes on to say, "And we have seen something." What was that? We have seen his glory. And to say that Jesus tabernacled among us and that he was the temple and that we've seen his glory means two things. It shows us that Jesus is God. Because the Shekinah, the magnificent glory of God, which was hovering over the ark on the mercy seat, was present on earth. And when the Shekinah glory of God was present in Exodus chapter 40, even Moses couldn't go in because God's glory kills on contact. Yet Jesus has the audacity to say, "I am that glory. I am the temple." Jesus was called Emmanuel. God is with us. Yet Jesus is not just saying that he is God. but I am the way through the barrier to God. I am the sacrifice. I am the basin. I am the priest. I am the lamp. I am the bread. I'm everything. Let's think about that. The 10 Commandments in the ark, Jesus fulfilled them completely. The atonement cover, the mercy seat, Jesus atoned for, paid for our sin with his own blood. The tabernacle, the table, with the bread of the 12 tribes, which was always in the holy place. Jesus said, I am the bread of life. The altar where the priest would intercede to pray for the people. Jesus now intercedes on our behalf in the Father's presence. The lampstand giving light to the whole world. Jesus said, I am the light of the world. The courtyard, the place to access for God's people. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. The basin for washing. Jesus washed his disciples' feet on the night before his death. The massive thick curtain barrier of the most holy place was torn from top to bottom, not from bottom to top. When Jesus died, only God could do that. And then Jesus cried out, it is finished. Jesus is the true priest. Jesus is the true sacrifice. It's all about Jesus. He has no rival. He has no equal. What a wonderful, beautiful, powerful name the name of Jesus is. So we worship him. Finally, how do we connect to the tabernacle? In 3 ways. Firstly, in a grace-based relationship with God. In the old tabernacle and in traditional religions, you had to do things to get to God. Confess your sins, bring your sacrifice to serve God and to serve others. Say your prayers, be kind. But in the tabernacle that Jesus has created, it's all in reverse. Religion says, do good and you're in. Jesus said, I'm good. Trust in me and come in. Because Jesus is the tabernacle. And then all of our good deeds start in the way out, not on the way in. We move out into the world with gratitude and joy. And my friends, if you're doing good to people hoping to get in with God, then are you really serving the people you're helping? Or is it about you? Because you need it. And if that is the case, then your service will quickly become a duty and a grind. But for Christians who understand about grace, service is about bringing joy to the one that we love and peace to others. And then secondly, we can know intimacy with God. Through Jesus, we can know God face to face. We're all priests now. We don't have to pay one man to go in once a year to get a glimpse of the Shekinah glory. We can go in. John says, we have seen his glory. So how intimate is your relationship with God? Invest time in that. And then thirdly, if it's true that we have received the glory of God in our lives, then to quote 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 5, we are the temple. We are built into the living stones. Built by living stones into the great cornerstone. But notice that Peter doesn't say, I am a temple, but he says, you are a temple. So it's not like we're all little temples, but we come together built into a temple. And that means at least that our community is supposed to be a place of beauty. We are a temple, a community of believers, whether it is here on a Sunday or in home groups or in prayer triplets. And all the work that Moses was supposed to put into making the temple beautiful, to show that heaven is on earth, and to show the world that God is coming back and paradise is possible. And to do that, Moses had to make everything beautiful with precious stones and gorgeous curtains and elaborate metals. There was incredible colors. Now all of that detail and all of that work is to go into our relationships, the way we interact, the way we have friendships across racial and national barriers. As we remember as Christians, we are not firstly British or Danish or Austrian or Spanish or Polish. Brexit shouldn't matter to Above Bar Church. We are one family. We are citizens of heaven. and we love everyone. We've had a little bit of animosity to our brothers and sisters from the EU. That is wrong. We are brothers and sisters of heaven. But it's also how we share money with each other and forgive one another. We are now supposed to be the beauty of the place where God's presence dwells. And because we've experienced the presence of God, all of those things which divide people get healed. Our social relationships, our cultural, our psychological relationships. Put all the effort which Moses put into making the tabernacle beautiful into our community beautiful. Come to Jesus, and he'll take you all the way in. As the band comes up. Oh no, Billy's going to come up to lead us. We're going to go with the band? I don't know. Anyway, let me finish with these verses from Hebrews chapter 7, verse 23. Close your eyes as you think about this. Now there have been many of those priests since death prevented them from continuing in office, but because Jesus lives forever, he has a permanent priesthood. Therefore, he is able to save completely those who come to God through him. Let's pray. Thank you, Lord Jesus, that we don't have to wonder what God is like. Thank you that we can have confidence to come to your throne. Thank you that you have no rival and no equal. What a wonderful God you are. Amen.